II was over. This was it. VJ Day. Peace. It's wonderful.
Once World War II ended, the Russians and the Americans competed to capture German engineers and rocket designers. As Germany was being divided between the Allies, Soviet Union military captured an entire V-2 production plant. The V-2 rocket was the first long-range guided ballistic missile, and its technology was at least 20 years ahead of everyone. The Americans, on the other hand, were able to capture a significant portion of the V-2 engineer team who did not want to work with the Soviet Union. Both nations began to compete in something later known as the space race.
Wernher von Braun was one of the most important people that was involved in the space race. He had helped the Americans win the race thanks to his great intelligence and dedication to space travel. But who is this Wernher von Braun? Wernher von Braun was born on March 23, 1912, in Varzitz, which was a little town in Germany at the time. Little Wernher von Braun had interests in space travel at a young age already, thanks to a book named Die Rakete zu den Planetenräumen, which in English is By Rocket to Planetary Space. These interests at a young age led him to study at the Technical University of Berlin, where he joined the Spaceflight Society Club and assisted in liquid-fueled rocket motor tests. The Technical University of Berlin was also where he got his first bachelor's in engineering. Wernher von Braun joined the Nazi Party on November 12, 1937. This choice would lead to the taking off for his career. His membership with the Nazi Party got him to become a technical director of the V-2 program, which was located in Peenemünde in northern Germany. This was where Wernher von Braun would spend the whole war, creating the V-2 rocket and enhancing its features. Once the war was over, Wernher von Braun and many other German scientists and engineers surrendered to the United States in fear of being captured by Russians. But Wernher von Braun was only a help to the United States. So what about the Soviet Union?
The Soviet Union needed a very qualified engineer to lead this race. This man would be Sergei Korolev. At a young age, Sergei was a brilliant student in math and sciences. After graduating from Kiev Institute, he became the leader of the Soviet Union Rocket Propulsion Group. In 1938, his career came to a halt after being arrested on trumped-up charges by Stalin's secret police. Korolev spent the next 7 years of his life in a Siberian gulag. As World War II came to an end, engineers were needed to create new rockets for the Soviet Union. Sergei Korolev was then released from the work camps and began working as the leader of the Soviet Union's rocket program. As the Soviet Union had failed to get their hands on the V-2 blueprints, Sergei and his team worked very hard to reverse engineer the rocket that they had captured. After hard work, they finally came up with a new rocket, the R-1, which was essentially an improved version of the V-2. It had a range of 270 kilometers, which was 70 kilometers farther than the German V-2. After its first successful launch in 1948, Sergei Korolev's identity was to be kept a national secret. The real game-changing rocket was the R-7. This multi-engine rocket was a revolutionary concept in 1957. It was still the first intercontinental ballistic missile, capable to carry a 5,400 kilogram warhead more than 8,000 kilometers. Its range was not enough to scare the Americans, but the R-7 was more of a scientific instrument. Sputnik was attached to the R-7 rocket, even though it was still in the testing phase. Sputnik was the name given to the 84 kilogram object heaved into space. This satellite was equipped with 4 external radios able to broadcast back to Earth. The small object was visible from Earth for 21 days and then eventually blew up as it descended into Earth's atmosphere on January 4th, 1958. About a month later, on November 3rd, 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 2 and carried the first dog into space, Laika. She died 6 hours later due to lack of air.
After the launches of both Sputnik 1 and Laika the dog into space, the United States wanted to participate in this race with as much power as they could. This is how NASA was created on July 29, 1958, with the idea that Aeronautics Space Organization would help them win the race.
The next step of the space race would be to send a human into space. The USSR interviewed and passed a series of tests to soldiers in order to choose who would be the best fit for the flight. Mental and physical fitness would be key, as traveling through space would not be an easy task. Just weeks before the launch, it was decided that Yuri Gagarin would be the first human to travel through space.
Апреля 1951 года в Советском Союзе выведен на орбиту вокруг Земли.
On April 12, 1961, the Soviet Union shocked the world as they successfully launched the first man in space. Yuri Gagarin traveled one orbit around the Earth in a craft named Vostok 1. After landing on Earth by parachute, Yuri was credited by the International Federation of Aeronautics with the first human spaceflight. This brought lots of attention to the Soviet Union and made Yuri a worldwide hero.
On September 12, 1962, John F. Kennedy held a speech and advised the American people and promised them that they would reach the moon before the end of the century. Over the next 3 years, the achievements between both Americans and the Russians were shared on both sides.
Things turned around after 1965 when Sergei Korolev died of a brain tumor in 1966. His replacement, Vasily Pavlovich, was not the same, and after many failures and lack of government funding, the Soviets fell behind in the space race.
A couple years passed until the event of the decade finally arrived.
On July 20th, 1969, just 6 months before the end of the decade, Apollo 11's lunar module landed on the moon. 500 million people around the world watched and listened as Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon's surface.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Wait a second. That's not the authentic footage. Ah, there you go. Perfect.
The space race was over. In a come-from-behind victory, the USA won.